Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about reading comprehension. So, my objective for this lecture is for you to be able to understand four factors that influence comprehension. All right, I have a graph here that might help you break this down. So, there are four things that you need to consider when you are thinking about comprehension, which is an active process of obtaining meaning from written text. So, you have the text. And under the text, you have to kind of discern the readability of the text, the structure of the text, and the organization of the text. So we're going to go take a deep dive into three of these things soon. You also have to consider the activity. We spend a lot of time with the activity and the reader. Basically, the reader is the person that you are teaching to read. So each one of you had a student, you have assessed them, you have written out their background summary, you were able to see what are their gaps. So that's what the reader is. And the context of why are they reading. So we're going to be talking about all four of these factors in relation to comprehension. So first, let's look at the text. So when you think about the text, you want to make sure the text is readable, all right? So there are many readability formulas that many researchers, here's 5 of them that are popular, where the researchers have decided the readability depends on the length of the word and the sentence and how familiar your student is in reading that text. You can also use Lexile scores to find text that is readable for your student who you're teaching to read. So that's what readability is all about. So for the text, consider the readability. The other thing that you want to consider is the structure. So every text falls under 2 categories. It's either a narrative or an informational or expository text. And there's a structure for a narrative. You must be familiar with the plot, setting, characters, point of view, theme. Those are things that you can explicitly teach your student for them to discern, is this a narrative text or not? Another thing that helps comprehension is if you explicitly teach them informational text structures. Expository text includes descriptive text, or maybe the text is organized in a sequential pattern, or it might be a cause and effect text, or the author may be comparing and contrasting, or the text might have a problem or a solution. So let's talk about this in detail. When you think about informational text or expository text, we talked about those 5 different ways that the text can be categorized. So when you have a descriptive text, teach them signal words that will give them clues that this text is descriptive. Some words could be such as, or for instance, in addition, also. They're describing the text. When you have a problem and solution, you can directly teach these signal words: problem, issue, since, as a result, solution, idea, leads to, causes. So provide students with direct instruction in these signal words. Maybe you can have a poster like this in your classroom, and give them clues on what kind of a text are they reading. A compare and contrast signal words could be similar, same, alike, both. When they see these words, that's a clue that this text is a compare and contrast text. Cause and effect, some words would be since, because, if, due to, as a result of. And sequential text, you have your first, this happens, second, third, then next. So teaching your students these clue words can help them comprehend the text better. This is for expository informational text. You can also use graphic organizers. Your textbook has a lot of different strategies. Some for narrative text, this is a popular graphic organizer where a student may read a text and you can ask them to chart what's the problem, what's the rising action, what's the climax, the falling action, what's the resolution. Teach them how to discern and understand the text using a graphic organizer. You can do the same thing with those five different categories for expository text that we talked about. So graphic organizer is a great strategy to organize the text and give your student an understanding of the text features of what they're reading. So another category that we talked about readability, we talked about that structure. Now we're going to talk about the organization of the text. So a text can be organized either explicitly, where the information is stated directly in the text, and the student might need minimum background information. When a text is implicit, the student needs background knowledge and reasoning and inferential skills. So let's look at an example. Let's say we have a text and you have the student read this short story. Ben got a car for his birthday, which cost his parents a lot of money. He also got an iPhone and a new watch. Lucky Ben. But Ben still wasn't happy. So here is some comprehension. An explicit question where the student can read closely in the text and find the answer directly is, what did Ben get for his birthday? So the student didn't need any background information. He can find the answer in the text. That's explicit. Implicit would be a comprehension question like, why was Ben unhappy? Now, they would need to know a little bit about Ben, some background information about the character in the story to be able to answer this question. They would need some inferential skills. So those are the two different ways text can be organized, explicitly or implicitly. So that's what text is all about. Now let's look at the activity. We talked a lot about the activity in our previous lectures, so I'm just going to quickly review it here. Again, let's talk about the reader here. The reader is the person that you are teaching. So what are the prior knowledge and skills? Basically what the reader knows, his prior knowledge, his gaps, how he decodes, how fluently he reads, what vocabulary he knows, all that influences comprehension. So we talked about that in the past. Let's talk about activity. Activity is the nature and purpose of the reading, and that also affects comprehension. When you're working with students, some of you have already experienced this. You have students who rush through the text. So basically, activity is what's the motivation for that student to be engaged in the text. So when you had given assessment, you found some of your students really just wanted to get it done. So they answered so fast that you were not able to discern whether they understood the text or not because they're rushing through it. I had a parent share that a student was pulled out for reading instruction, and that student did not want to be pulled out. So that was a reason why that student did not make progress, because the motivation is affected. So activity different students are motivated to read for different reasons. That's what activity is all about. And lastly, we looked at the text, we looked at the activity, whether the students engaged or not. We looked at the reader. Now we're going to look at the context. So what is the context all about? The researchers have divided, McEvan has found that when students experience success, they are more motivated to read. So success depends on how you plan your instruction, the selection and sequencing of your instructional objectives, seeing if the students are able to read the text. The text is at instructional level. How you group the students, like the example that I shared with you when a student was pulled out, their motivation came down. So how you group your students is also important. The procedures and activities. You're familiar with the Orton Gillingham. Some of you felt like, will the student who's an older student be engaged in reviewing those sounds? It all depends on how you present it. So that's what context is how are you setting up the instruction? So today we covered the 4 factors that influence comprehension. You have the text, which is the readability, the structure, and the organization. And you can actually explicitly give them some clues and background to understand the text. Set up the activity in a way that will motivate the student to learn. Know the reader so you can set up the context and select reading sequences or reading plans that will allow the reader to experience success. So thank you so much for listening. I would just like you to comment and add any questions you have, and we will see you online. Thank you for listening.